Okay, in this video, we're looking at Chapter 5, Section 2, always the St. James heading, Chapter 5, Section 2, and you underneath that St. James heading, you're writing the chapter, and then you write comparing fractions, decimals, and percents. And of course, we underline in red. Okay, so to compare fractions, decimals, and percents, you have to have a common format. So either you have to change everything to fractions, change everything to decimals, or change everything to percents. So it doesn't matter, but you got to be able to do all of the above, okay? So there's tricks to this, okay? Um, Especially with percents to decimals. Percents to decimals is really easy. You're just moving the decimal, okay? So if I use to go from percents to decimals, if I have 45%, okay, and I want to move it to a decimal, we all know that there's a little decimal hidden right there on the other side of that 5. So to go from a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal point 2 spaces to the left. So then the decimal is 0.45. That's it. 45% as a decimal is 0.45. That's it. That's all there is to it. So then, if I want to go from the decimal 0.45 and I want to move it to a percent, I literally move that decimal point back 2 spaces, but I go to the right. 1, 2. So then my percent is 45%. So 0.45 as a percent is 45%. I just move the decimal. And moving the decimal is what you're really doing is you're dividing by 100 over here or multiplying by 100. That's really what you're doing, okay? And we can prove this to you. If I take 45 and I divide by 100, I can show you how this works out. I'm just going to move this to the side a little bit, okay? I can show you how this works out. Obviously, I can't do 100 into 45, so I do have to, add zeros here. So I'm looking at 45 into, 100 into 450. That goes 4 times. Okay. And then 45, 450 subtracting 400, you get 50. You bring down the 0. It goes into 5 times. Okay. And there you have it. And you can see now, you can see that the decimal is now in front of the 4. That's dividing by 100. It moved the decimal from the right side of 5, and it moved it 2 spaces, 1, 2. So instead of you doing the longhand and doing that math with the long division, just move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. And then when you want to put it back as a percent, you move it 2 spaces to the right. Because if you do 100 times 45, okay, you're going to see, okay, that you get, oops, this was supposed to be decimal here. There we go. And then you get, and of course you move the decimal point because there's 2 here, and you get 45%. You can see that's really sloppy, but you can see that the decimal point just gets moved around. When you multiply by 100, the decimal point gets moved to the right, and when you divide by 100, the decimal point gets moved to the left. That's always true for everything. So if you want to go from percent to a decimal, you move the decimal point to the left. If you want to go from a decimal to a percent, you move the decimal point to the right. 2 spaces, just 2 spaces. And you can helps remember 2 spaces because there are 2 zeros here. 2 zeros, 2 spaces. 2 zeros, 2 spaces. Okay? That's to go from percents to decimals and decimals to percents. When it comes to fractions as percents, if you want to go fractions to percents, okay? And we kind of did this in the last section, okay, when we did ratios. again, you take the fraction, let's say 3 over 8, and you need a common denominator, or not a common denominator, you need the denominator to be 100, sorry, for it to be a percent. So the denominator needs to be 100. And to do that, you need to figure out, okay, what number do I multiply to I get 100? Or, since that would take a lot of like trial and error, 8 times this, and then 8 times this, and then 8 times this, okay? What I tell my students is to solve the proportion like you did in chapter 4, which is why we taught it to you. You cross multiply, you get 3 times 100 equals 8 times x. Okay, so you get 300 equals 8x. How do we get x by itself? Divide by 8, divide by 8. So then x equals, this is where you do have a calculator. I don't have it with me right now. I never seem to have a calculator when I'm doing these videos, but 300 into 8, thankfully I did it on the side here, I just have to find it. You get 37.5, and that means it's 37.5%, because that's what you were looking for. You were trying to change that fraction into a percent. So it becomes 37.5%. That's kind of all there is to it. Just put it over 100. Okay. There is another method. So if this is method 1, there is another method. I think it's a little longer, but I will give it to you. Method 2, we'll say method, this is method 2. This was method 1. Okay, method 2 would be, if I'm doing 3/8, I would divide 3 by 8, okay, and that gives me 3, 24, 6, and then 7, 56, 4. Again, you gotta bring down the last 0. You just keep adding zeros. If you ever need to divide a fraction into a decimal, you just keep adding zeros. 40, and that gives you 5. Okay, now, here's the fraction 3 over 8 as a decimal, 0.375, but it's not a percent yet, it's just a decimal. So how do I go from a decimal to a percent? We did that up here. We did it up here. To go from a decimal to a percent, I have to move the decimal how many spaces? 2. In which direction? To the right. So 1, 2. Okay, so this is where then it becomes 37.5%. Okay, so I personally, you'll see me use method 1 because it gets me to the percent right away. I don't have to then move the decimal point, blah, blah, blah. So you'll see me use method 1 a lot, but I want you to be aware that there is another method. You can do the division and then move the decimal and all of that. That is very true. You can do that. I happen to just solve the proportion and you're done. It's kind of one just big step. Okay, so let's write each percent as a decimal. Right? Just say, I'll do a shorthand to be quick. Write percent as a decimal. Okay, so if I have here, my percent is 90%. Okay, and I want to write it as a decimal. Okay, I take that decimal point that's always hidden here, and I move it 2 spaces to the left, so the decimal is 0.9. Done. Just move it to the left. Okay, I have 80%. I want to make it a decimal. Move it 2 spaces to the left, and you get 0.8, and you're done. Okay, 172%. I want to make it a decimal. Same procedure. Just 2 spaces. 1, 2. So it's 1.72 as a decimal. Just keep moving them to the left. Here's my percent. 245%. Going to make it into a decimal. Here's my decimal. Move it 2 spaces. 1, 2. So it's 2.45. That's my decimal. Okay, now let's write the decimal as a percent. Okay, let's write the decimal as a percent. So here we have 0.62. Now I want that as a percent. So here I'm going from a decimal to a percent. So I need to move it 2 spaces to the right. So it's 62%. You just need to keep track on whether you're going left or right. You have to keep track of going if you're going left or right. So the 0.94 as a percent. Again, move the 2 spaces. 1, 2 to 94%. Good. Next one. 0.475. Make it into a percent. 1, 2. So then it's 47.5%. There you go. Okay. Not hard at all. You just have to keep track on whether you're going left or right. So last thing, write the fraction as a percent. Okay, write the fraction as a percent. So my fraction here, 12 over 25. Okay, this one's an easy one because you have to make it over 100, and you can see what you would do to the 25. But let's do that proportion thing. Okay, so you cross multiply, so you get 12 times 100 equals 25 times x. Yes, you have to write that line, you know you do. And you get 1200 equals 25x. Divide by 25. Divide by 25. Okay, and x equals what? 48%. And you're done. And you're done. Okay, let's try another one. Let's try, excuse me, let's try another one. 7 over 4. It's an improper fraction, but that's okay because we just stick the set up my proportion. I'm solving for the percent here over the 100. So I cross multiply. I get 7 times 100 equals 4 times x. So it's 700 equals 4x. Okay, we divide by 4, and I get x to equal what? 175%. Ta-da! That's all there is to it. Okay, your problem for tonight, or class tomorrow, is write the fraction as a percent. So here is your fraction. Your fraction is 9 over 4. I want the percent. What is the percent? Okay, see you next class.